My name is Andrea Behrends, as was already mentioned. I'm professor of anthropology at Leipzig University, and our roundtable is called Academic Freedom, Transnational Perspectives on a Contested Concept. I will present the four panelists and Markus Dressler, who will then give an introduction to the topic, and then we will have the presentations, and then we will have 35 minutes of discussion, or 30 minutes. So let me start with Ülker Sözen. She is a sociologist from Turkey, a postdoc researcher at the Institute for the Study of Religion at Leipzig University since 2022. Ülker has produced studies on authoritarianism, civil society activism, digital media, youth, and gender, and she recently taught a course on digital media and Islam at Leipzig University. Over there, Tuba İnal-Çekiç. She is that, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Tuba is a postdoc researcher at Technical University of Darmstadt in the Urban and Spatial Sociology department. She has a PhD from Urban and Regional Planning at Yıldız University in Istanbul, and she is one of the co-founders of Off University, an organization for peace. And this organization aims to create new strategies to uphold and sustain academic life and knowledge in countries threatened by anti-democratic and authoritarian regimes. Bengi Aslan is a project manager and learning designer who has worked at Off University since 2021. In 2016, she moved to Germany as an urban scholar for her MA degree in heritage conservation and site management, and started working in civil society as a cultural manager in 2019. Currently, her work continues on learning methodologies, facilitating learning processes, and project management. And next to me is Hanna Al-Taher. Hanna Al-Taher is a political scientist and writer and researcher. She's a lecturer in political theory and research associate or wissenschaftliche Mitarbeiterin at Technical University Dresden. Her current work centers on gendered citizenship and power in Jordan. She researches on Middle East politics, state theory, liberation, and notions of political freedom, and she believes in the importance of freedom in research and teaching. Markus Dressler, my colleague from Leipzig University, is a professor for modern Turkish studies at the Institute for the Study of Religion at Leipzig University, and he focuses on religion and politics and minority issues in Turkey with a historical perspective. And this semester, he's also teaching a seminar on anti-Semitism in Turkey. And I would now like to pass the word to you, Markus, for an introduction to our roundtable. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. I'm very happy that we were able to organize this panel for the Science Festival, and I'll try to flesh out the background for this conversation that we want to have. The polarization around the question of the legitimacy of Israel's warfare on Gaza is an international one, in which different guiding metaphors are positioned to justify particular positions. Israel's right to exist and defend itself on the one hand, the demand for recognition of political and humanitarian rights for the Palestinians on the other. In Germany, there has, with some rather marginal exceptions, been little dispute concerning the condemnation of the Hamas terrorist attack. The question of how to address Israel's war on Gaza, on the other hand, has been much more difficult to debate. pro-Palestinian and thus Israel critical activities have very quickly been related to anti-Semitism. In the realms of academia and culture, this has led to a withdrawal of invitations, cancellations, some dismissals, intimidations, and an act that probably stands out was, for example, the Bild-Zeitung's profiling of academics that defended pro-Palestinian students' right to protest as Israel haters and thus anti-Semites. All of this led to a sense of censorship and the practice of self-censorship, especially among those academics in Germany that were not willing to subscribe to the German Staatsräson, raison d'etat, and its invocation of an unconditional support for Israel. Just maybe a last note on that. It's just in the last weeks that German Chancellor Scholz underlined this unconditionality of German support for Israel, underlining also that there will always be military support for Israel. While at the same time, parts of the Israeli government ever more bluntly articulate ethnic cleansing of the Gaza as its ultimate goal. Now, the starting point of this conversation on academic freedom in a transnational perspective has been the sense that there is something particular about the German debate. While most German academics, my assumption, would probably see little reason to question the state of academic freedom in our country, this is not how Germany has lately been perceived from outside, at least not with the same certainty as from within. So in this context, the idea for this panel developed in conversations between Ülker Sözen and myself, and also other colleagues, especially, but not only, here at Leipzig University. And I would like to acknowledge that Ülker has been the major force behind the organization of this panel. So we thought, integrating others in the process, that it could be fruitful to bring together for a round table non-German academics with two characteristics. One, having been socialized in a non-German academic context, thus carrying a certain distance that enables them to develop a critical perspective on the normal of German political sensitivities and German academia. And two, having themselves been subject to infringement of academic freedom and other forms of discrimination, thus embodying a particular sensitivity on that topic. Our aim now here is not to deconstruct or offer a genealogy of the Deutsche Staatsräson. This would obviously not be possible to be done in 60 minutes. But we hope that our panel, that takes a perspective that is transnational and critical, can foster a reflective engagement with this rather fragile good that we call academic freedom. This debate will also need to address structural questions, such as the precarity of academic labor and the pressure that is exerted from that angle for complying with majoritarian normativities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markus, for this insightful framing. I think these are very important remarks. And I would like to start by giving some background to my experience and understandings of academic freedoms. Before coming to Germany in 2021, my academic life, my education, my work experience has been entirely in Turkey. I'm one of the signatories of the peace petition by Academics for Peace that's publicly announced in 2016, so almost 10 years ago. This petition was calling the Turkish state to stop the rampant military operations and violence over civilians in Kurdish cities at that time. And as academics, we gathered together and we proposed a petition. We called the state to stop the violence. And because of that, I got dismissed from my job by the state. I got criminalized and trialed for supporting terrorism, together with hundreds of peace academics in Turkey. My passport got suspended for 3 years, and I have been barred from working in education, which still continues. In Turkey, I cannot officially, legally work in the education sector anymore. Later on, I have taken part in the solidarity organizations of peace academics, mainly with drafting grant proposals to sustain financial resources for these organizations, and to create an autonomous, independent academy that advances social justice and equality. I think we really did many good things, and we still continue to do things as peace academics from Turkey to produce and to create the spaces of alternative academic knowledge production and critical thinking, and most importantly, to make this knowledge public and accessible to people. I had been a teaching assistant in Turkey at a public university between 2011 and 2017, so almost, 6 years. In the Turkish system, unlike Germany, most of the academic staff, including assistants, have had permanent job contracts. So did I. And a professor and an assistant are subject to the same legal status. I have been a union member and a union activist during this time. Our unions in the education sector involve both academic staff, both professors, associates, assistants, and administrative staff together. And I think this is an important factor which contributes to the political identity and perspectives of union members and generates a push to practice and internalize egalitarianism beyond status and economic and cultural capital. I think that kind of a framework also contributed to my development as an academic, as an individual, and as a little bit of an activist. As I said, I have been in Germany since 2021, mainly on postdoctoral scholarships and short-term employment, as most of the academics in Germany. So 80% of the academic staff are bound with short-term contracts. I think this only entails people with PhDs. And 92% of this wissenschaftliches Mittelbau, I think these are the people other than the professors, the 92% of this demographic is again precarious. They don't have job contracts. So these short-term arrangements and generalized precarity create a great deal of pressure, insecurity, and stress for myself and many others. Especially migrant academics whose livelihoods and residential permits depend on continuously seeking grants and making applications without a social security net. This leads to a highly precarious academic hustle culture, so this is not independent of neoliberalism. And this takes place in what I call the neoliberal feudal academic structure in Germany. Given that a few professors, mostly male, even in social sciences and humanities, have tenures and this secure positions. And this was very interesting to me as a person coming from Turkey, because in social sciences and humanities, most of the academic staff, most of the professors are women. And as I said, these professors have most of the power and resources, and the rest is mostly disposable. And in such a condition, talking about academic freedom first requires us to address this situation, because when you are dependent and disposable, it's really hard to exercise critical thinking freely. As a sociologist from Turkey in German academia, another thing that I realized was the encouragement towards me and other academics from non-Western contexts to talk about the authoritarianism, political violence and oppression in our countries, in the non-Western context, in Turkey. When I observe that the others like me raise critical points regarding Germany, German academia and political life, even in the leftist and liberal circles, I feel we meet with discouragement or deemed incompetent to do so. This is mostly exposed with the current war and this unjustifiable violence by Israel over Gaza, Palestine, and Lebanon. I think this pressure over criticism and dissent is tied to the underlying motivation to keep the status quo and power relations as they are in German academia, which is understandable because as a social scientist, as a sociologist, this is my job to understand this. But this can be changed, and this should be changed, and this should be discussed. And secondly, I think this is related with the legacies and the continuing legacies, maybe I should say, of colonialism and Orientalism present in our academic traditions, particularly in social sciences and humanities. Now, to conclude, I would like to state and re-emphasize some key points. First, I think academic freedoms depend on and matter, given the public role of academic and scientific knowledge. That academia and science are parts of the public good, and they should have some relationship to public interests. The knowledge and studies that we produce should aim to inform, contribute to, and advance public debates for social justice and democracy. Classroom and our role as educators mean a lot for this. However, by only remaining in universities, we cannot properly achieve this. Secondly, academic freedoms require autonomy and self-organization. The dependence of academic knowledge production, meaning our institutions, universities, and our employment relations on the state and on the neoliberal capitalist market has a corrosive and devaluing effect on the frameworks of academic knowledge and academic freedoms. That is, we need to protect the autonomy of universities and also not rely on them. Also establish other spaces and mobilize other alternative resources to democratize and collectivize academic knowledge. That is what I learned and what I experienced in Turkey with our experience with Solidarity Academies, for instance. And Off University is also a good example of this, which we are going to be discussing today. And third, we need to face colonialism and racism to address academic freedoms in our global age of transnational flows and migration. We need to face and critique the coloniality and other regimes of inequality deep-seated in academic traditions and institutions. We need to face the value-laddenness of academic perspectives. Here I remember Max Weber, who talked about it when he wrote on science as vocation. And we also need to be critical of our perspectives and our value-laddenness as well. Despite how much we consider ourselves as progressive, leftist, and pro-equality academics, this requires us to be able to understand and approach the so-called extreme social groups and subjects on the margins without preconceived moral and subjective judgments. And finally, we are faced with this question: how to produce academic knowledge as a public good against the nihilism and anti-democratic currents of our time. The nihilism refers to intense polarization, the rise of extreme right-wing movements, anti-gender ideology, organized forms of xenophobia, sexism, fundamentalist policies. We are all surrounded by these in this age. And those challenge our built-in political ideas, our values and the truths, the things that we deem as truths. And these developments, they unsettle and agitate us. Here, resilience and grit can help us as a calm and sober perspective nurtured by reason, self-reflection, and responsibility. And together with this, securing the spaces for different opinions and dissent. Not only to avoid radicalization of the so-called extremes, because there's a justification like that. I mean, if you give space to alternative opinions so that they don't radicalize. But that is something important for us, to change us, to create some kind of development in ourselves, for progress and advancement, for both us and them, the groups that we deem as the others, in line with the ideals of social justice and equality. So that is it from me. Thank you very much. So I'm passing the, thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm passing the word to Tuba.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Also, thank you for the invitation, Ülker, and the organization. So as they all mentioned, that I'm one of the founders of University, and of University I will just take it from where Ülker left, what happened in Turkey in 2016. And in 2017, some of the scholars, dismissed scholars, persecuted scholars, and also exiled academicians were here already in Germany. And in 2017, we thought that we could find a way that we are away from the state surveillance and state oppression through an online platform. And then in 2017, we founded Off University as an NGO, IFA, non-governmental organization, non-profit organization, based in Berlin, with 24 other founding members. You can just scan the QR code there and follow us, and also read more about Off University from our website. And I would like to go what we do since then. So after 2017, we established a platform that's quite secure and that keep people away from the state surveillance and the oppression. And we had published a publication platform, and also we have the website to inform people and to call people and to support, to be in solidarity with scholars at risk. And since then, we hosted courses. We also hosted some research projects and also hosted some scholars at risk at Off University as a host institution. And also we reached out like more than 200 scholars at risk and supported them and hosted their courses and made them afford their life at least for a semester, academic semester. And in doing so, we also hosted more than 70 courses since 2017. So among what we have all done since 2017, we also hosted some research projects, and the topic for today that we will discuss is one of the research projects that was funded by the Ministry of Freedom and Education and Research in German, Education and Research Institute, or Ministry, let me say, about academic freedom. So 2024 was academic freedom year. So our project was called Urgently Wanted Freedom of Research and Learning. So it was an artistic research into the educational aspirations of new arrivals in Berlin. So it was Berlin-based project, and we focused on new arrivals and new Berliners who were aged between 18 and 35. So it was a research-based project, and then we had two outputs. We had two workshops, which were one of them was a radio play workshop, and the other one was a video play workshop. And at the end, still in progress, we are producing a video and radio play about how people perceive freedom in Germany, learning and research freedom in Germany. So the preliminary results will be on Bengi's task.
First, more on the workshop. It would be actually very nice to get your opinion on these questions too. These were the questions shaped the workshop's content. And as Tuba already mentioned, the output or the goal of the workshop to create one video content through the discussions of these questions. So the participants would be the subject of the video and the maker of the video. Same for the radio play. And I really encourage you to think for yourself the answers of these questions. They discuss what do freedom and academic freedom mean to the newcomers. What are their expectations of academic freedom, vocational training, and higher education? Are their expectations fulfilled? And if not, why not? And back then, it wasn't actually any information or conclusion, but we couldn't actually gather a big group of workshop joiners, let me say, and it was very interesting to me because almost 20% of students enrolled in Berlin are new to Germany. But although we aim to only gather 15 people per workshop, we couldn't meet this number. Now, then we didn't read into this situation. We thought it's the beginning of summer and maybe they are not committing their weekends, or I don't know, but now looking back, maybe it was already giving us some input about our research. And we come to this phase. The project is ending at the end of this year. Radio play and the video are ready. Actually, today we are premiering that also in Berlin with another event happening around the same time. These are the findings we can, put on a bullet point, and I can go through them one by one. But mostly it's the experience of these workshop joiners, or later on we also had chance to collect more input from other event goers at Lange Nacht, Long Night of Science at Humboldt University. There was a box for us for those who wanted to give their perspective. We recorded also those inputs, and these recordings are also in the video play. And then we are still collecting some information because we think we couldn't collect all the experiences. But yeah, as I said, these are the findings. Mostly it's technical, having the degree in your own country, sometimes not transferable, it's not recognized in Germany. Or there are some, of course, preconditions to continue your journey of education because of the language barrier. Maybe you need to learn the language to continue your studies. So this was the first point we come up. And then the second one is the lack of ability for universities to address the issues of newcomers, because they are most of the time tackled in this general bucket of international students, which are different, of course. Like if you are an exchange student, you have a different context, maybe language not an issue for you. But if you're a newcomer trying to settle in a new context, then you might need further support, or you might face different challenges. And these international offices are actually not competent to tackle these challenges, was another finding we have at the end of the research. Then the third and fourth is very concrete, is our workshop joiners think freedom of education or academic freedom and freedom of learning cannot be separated, and it should be tackled in a more comprehensive approach. Or the fourth one is, I'm having a hard time, lack of community form of learning or diverse decolonial curriculum, or in another way of saying hierarchy in discussion, because you can discuss decolonization, but who are the discussants are changing the discussion. Then other findings I would like to share today is, this is some clips from the video play, and no one wanted to show their faces in the video, even if they joined the workshop. Maybe they already had some second question, like second guessing themselves to attend the workshop. But even if they overcome that concern, they still didn't want to share their perspective in a video recording. You can hear their voices. Most of them allowed or consent to share their voices, and radio play is also a similar case, but there is no face, so maybe for them it's not a bigger question. But it was very interesting, like the discussion changes direction when you start recording, and even if you record, there are people concerned about sharing their faces. And there's a 1 minute video clip. Let's just hear that, because it just tells its story itself.
I'm still a student. I chose not to show my face here, and I chose not to show my face in the demonstration.
If you know the system, after 4th grade, you're allowed to go to different schools. I had grades for the Realschule, but they said, no, you should not go there. And so I ended up in the lowest, the Hauptschule. And yeah, that's why I only went until I was 16, then I left school. I did Ausbildung, yeah.
I didn't get to study here because like the experience of getting to study here was just very complicated. I don't know how to say this, like I credit my university degree, my bachelor's degree, in order for it to, I also studied theater, so also Germany has this rule of, for example, like the master's degree has to be in a way connected to your bachelor's. It was just very hard in the first place that I never really got to study yet.
So yeah, this is just a portion of the video, and it's just filled with these perspectives, and also, of course, the discussion always arrives to Palestine and Israel, what's going on in this past year. Of course, like the workshop took place in the summer, and that was another thing coming up, and we were also discussing at University, funded by Ministry of Education, how free we are to discuss about these things or record these and put as an output. But yeah, not to take more of time, we will be here, we have some flyers, it's again work in progress. So if you would like to share your perspective, we will be around after the panel or during the Q&A, we can continue discussing. And of course, as an organization, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter. Thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. Sorry, I really don't like microphones because I tend to move around a lot, and it's not very, not very conducive to the microphone. Thank you so much. I think what I'm going to say ties in very well to what my colleagues have said. And I want to begin with just also quoting one of the most famous Palestinian scholars, Edward Said, who says that we don't have a right to be comfortable. To the contrary, it's our job to be uncomfortable, both in the sense of we have no right to feel comfort as academics, but also it's our job to ask questions that might go places that are a bit annoying and painful. And I think, he was a pain in a certain place of academia in very many ways, and I do think that that's sort of what really is our whole purpose as being researchers. So I'm going to talk about the erasure of Palestine in, if I can make this, yeah, I can make it move, fantastic. So I come from theory, so bear with me, but so this is, so that it'll be a bit more easy to follow. Unfortunately, I don't have nice colorful slides, I only have boring white ones, but I will first explain a little bit what do I mean by the erasure of Palestine in German-speaking academia. And this is based on research that I've been doing for the last 6 years. So actually, most of what I will be reading, although it might sound like it is from today, is actually 4 years or 5 years old. The corresponding article has only been published this year because, funnily enough, the topic of the erasure of Palestine from German-speaking academia didn't find a publisher. Not in Germany and not in Europe. So we had to publish this in the US, and then again, our US colleagues then publish about the unfreedom of the United States in Europe. So it's always easy to point the finger elsewhere when it comes to the absence of freedom. So that's the first thing, and then I will explain what silence and silencing means in that context with a few examples, and then come to the idea, really the limits of the liberal notions of freedom. And I have to say, maybe it's lucky that my educational background is not only in Germany, because I never had any illusions that there is very much freedom of speak or research in German education, including also schools. So my more recent work also includes working with teenagers in German schools across all three, Hauptschule, Realschule, Gymnasium, and how they have been well criminalized by their teachers. So maybe first, and I think that ties in very well into what you said, the erasure of Palestine is colonially constituted, and it stems in Germany in particular from a Lebensraum ideology that is a German context that they used first to rule in their African colonies. So it's a concept of ruling over space and race through science. And there is these residues of this ideology still there. So the sort of almost territorial exclusion of Palestine and Palestinians happens by way of education. And this is happening more since last year, where not only Palestinians, but also just showing solidarity with Palestinians is deemed a criminal offense almost. Yeah. So that means that Palestine continues to be a contentious issue in Western education. And I want to talk more about the silence and ideological erasures. So of course, not only Palestine and Palestinians are being erased, but it's just a very, it's a good way to explain and show things that might be more in your face in that particular context. But of course, the limitations and erasures in academia and what sort of knowledge can happen in academia are in other spheres as well. And we can see this especially in the structures of German academia that has, in Europe, one of the lowest numbers and percentages of international scholars, and also working class people are pretty much absent in German academia. Yeah, so we need to look at this like from a historical and a nationalist perspective. And then to come back to like why Palestine, and I think especially in Germany it's not a fringe topic, but it's really where we can see a lot of these limitations of freedom hinge on. And it happens within an epistemic nationalist framework that basically evicts politicized Palestinians qua being Palestinian as too political. So already saying this is already seeming offensive sometimes. So just an example to illustrate this, I was recently invited to give an introductory lecture about feminist post-colonial theory. And just a day before this lecture, the organizer called me up and said, okay, but you know, by the way, can you please not mention that you're Palestinian? So, I mean, I usually don't go into a talk unless it's the topic to announce what my origin is, right? I go and I give a lecture as I am a professional giving a lecture on my research topic. So I asked them, you know, why don't you want me to, so I told them I wasn't going to mention who I am as per origin, but actually, why don't you want me to? And they're like, well, yeah, das ist so ein sensibles Thema. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, my existence is a sensibles Thema, or what exactly is it that is bothering you about this? So then, in the end, I said, you know what, actually, this is a very good introduction for a lecture on post-colonial feminist theory. So actually, I wasn't going to mention that I'm Palestinian, but I guess now I will. Yeah. So now just to go back a bit to the concept. So in the research that I will have some quotes from that. Maybe I can already, put the first one. So this is research actually that we started doing in 2020. And we were asking Palestinian scholars how they are, how they feel within German-speaking academia. So these responses are from Germany, Deutschschweiz, and Austria. And from the responses, and I will show you a couple in a minute, we made out two different kinds of silences or silencing. So there is the kind of, and they're all like sort of connected and displaying the political and personal discomfort of German-speaking audiences towards the topic or the existence of Palestine. So there's on the one hand silencing as a reaction to voices that do speak. So if you do speak about something that's uncomfortable, you get told to shut up. But then there's also the silence reaction. The example, I think of this quote, which is basically that you say something and then there is just no reaction. There's no interaction. This just basically you're being ignored. It's almost as if you don't exist and as if you're being erased. So so this is an example from a student that we, those are not real names, but yeah. So it's a Palestinian student, and he had a discussion with the lecturer of the class because they were talking about the Middle East, and his question was, why weren't they reading any Palestinian scholars alongside Israeli scholars when the topic is the Middle East conflict? And then he explained this moment that when he said that, the other students almost like were scared of him and moved away, and he explained how he felt like really isolated in this moment, that people even physically remove themselves from him. And that's something that I'm not going to go into now, but there's also this gendered aspect that Palestinian male scholars often get this almost that they're perceived as threatening just by existing, whereas maybe women scholars, because of racist and Orientalist ideas, are deemed as docile and more easy to control. And I think that also brings up these kind of harsh reactions then when institutions realize that actually not everybody is willing to just play along with weird German oppressive academia. Yeah, this is another example from a scholar and her presentation during the pandemic. Okay, cool. Yeah, and then this, yeah, is a longer one that is, and I'm gonna end then just with two more things. So often when Palestinians or Palestinian scholars claim the right to life, it's actually often equated with death. So it's sort of a necrophilic politics, even in academia, that any kind of expression of wanting to be alive is immediately put into the context of terrorism and then of death, which means that Palestinians either appear as corpses or as terrorists and never actually as political subjects. And this scholar, Sanab al-Abdurrahman, has actually put this much more eloquently than I just have. And this brings me to the last aspect, which is liberal notions of freedom. So I would contest the idea that we actually have very much freedom, real freedom of speech, and that's not because freedom of speech doesn't exist, but because because the subject, so who is allowed to exercise the freedom of speech, that is limited. And I'm going to just read something from here, if I can. So, I mean, basically what I'm criticizing here is the idea of freedom, which has been colonially constituted and which always hinged on excluding colonized populations. And to just end this almost, so I would in particular argue that German state education strives to re-educate, punish, and discipline Palestinian students and their supporters while upholding the liberal notions of freedom, including the Israeli state's freedom to kill Palestinians. And yeah, so I'm going to end with this. Again, this, what I just read out, is more recent, but this is a quote from a scholar from 2022. Yeah, colleagues call us hostile or sensitive, dismissing that there is life and war happening outside the walls of academia. And when I read this, it's basically the same, that nothing changed about that quote. Yeah, that's the end, thank you. It's not very positive.
Thank you all very much. I must say, as an anthropologist, I'm fascinated by the way you combined your personal life, histories, and your academic life, and beyond academic life. So this is the time now to have comments, questions, or issues that you want to contribute. I promised 35 minutes. That was a lie. We have less. But we will sit outside at the table after this session in case you want to maybe more personally speak to the presenters. Is there anyone who would like to contribute or say something? Yes, please, Lucilla. You need a microphone.
Is this on? Yes. Oh, it's very loud. Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you to all of you really for your insights that you shared. My question is about something, I think it was both mentioned in Off University's presentation, but it kind of ran through all of your presentations. That is the relationship between academic freedom and, you know, freedom of expression or freedom of protest outside of academia, and how these are really very much interlinked. I mean, there was a voice of a student that mentioned something about that, but also in what you shared with us. And I was just wondering, reflecting on this space, and how can we sort of make this a more public conversation and really highlight that what is going on within, you know, the walls of academia, as you were just closing your presentation with, very much relates to what's also going on outside, and we can't think of them separately.
I share a lot of your experiences, I think, even though I'm not having the background of migration, but as a scientist working on sexism and feminism, and a female, I think there's a lot of these experiences I share. And my question is, maybe the reactions that you mention on your science work is not especially about Palestine, not only especially about your research about Palestine or Palestinian interests, but I think everybody in science that has a life out of academia that is threatened in some way and makes this threat part of her study. If it's sexism, anti-Semitism, or racism, or anti-Palestinianism, I don't know. I think we all share this experience of being awkward silence, or pitying, or being, I don't know, like this is not real science if you are like having these issues and talking about the issues. You know what I mean? So my question is, all of you are women like me, and what part of the reactions you experience are maybe also like in a intersectional way of looking at these problems. I would like to have some, I'll open up the window a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your very succinct presentations. I really appreciated how you all formulated not just your own experience, but also some sort of criticism that I think is very important. And I think it's very important to have these conversations within academia. I think there's an interesting conversation to have about the spaces where you can even voice these concerns, because I feel like a lot of what you have talked about today, I feel like a lot of my colleagues have experienced, and there's very rarely this type of forum where you can actually voice those criticisms and where you can discuss those things freely. So I think question number one, how do we have these conversations? And what other spaces? I think it's amazing that you started a space with Off University. Do you kind of envision for this criticism to become more vocal? And then kind of a second thing I thought was incredibly interesting about the German context in particular is that a lot of you also mentioned kind of state school education and how that actually plays a big role in how the academic system is structured as well. And I would kind of be interested to hear a bit about that as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much for your insights and for sharing these very important criticisms as well, which I think all have to make us think. And you talked a lot about, in a way, the cognitive practices of silencing and the institutional practices. What I find also really disturbing within the last year is a certain lack of empathy that is going through academia as well, or where basically it is not possible, if I would speak with Rothberg, to have something like a multidirectional grief, to have something to acknowledge that suffering, firstmost, that is happening in this context, and that is even pushed aside. So it's not even just about but it's not like even a colonial kind of denial and a denial of land, a denial of population, but it's also a denial of empathy, which I find deeply troubling in the context of not only the Palestinian conflicts, but also, for example, the Sudanese, which is totally forgotten. So we're sitting in a space in the global north, in Germany in particular. I find it's very self-involved. It's always about me, in a sense, or about what I have learned, but with a certain lack of empathy. And I wonder if you have an idea where that comes from, because it kind of bugs my mind, and I'm thinking about it a lot. Where does this lack of empathy come from?
Would you feel comfortable to we start with Hanna and then each of you?
Yeah, I would like to start with that last comment, because I think it's important, and I mean there's a lot to say, but I think partially the lack of empathy comes from wanting to avoid accountability, and kind of it is connected to my mind with colonialism or racist structures, because once you start dehumanizing one kind of people, then the concept of excluding people from humanity has started as a concept. And it bothers me too, this lack of empathy. And I think in the end, it does also come down to, an avoidance of accountability.
Well, maybe I can talk about your question about being a woman. I think that intersectionality, even though I have some like reserves or something, because like intersectionality somehow assumes like a fixed nature to identities and fixed nature to being disadvantaged in relation to certain, being part of certain identity groups. Like sometimes it turns into like a mathematical equation. Oh, you're a woman, Palestinian, because these are all identities are very dynamic and fixed. But definitely, I mean, there's a connection there. Like gender is always like very much inherent to regimes of colonialism. All this like power inequality systems, like gender is kind of integral to that. But I might think like, somehow like thinking that or treating like this different inequalities as if they are the same thing and as if they are emerging from the same source can make us a little bit like blind to the experience of the others, right? Because maybe, I don't know, empathy again, I mean, we, as social scientists, all the concepts are problematic to us. But sometimes when you say, you're also like me, then you might stop listening to the other person's story, right? So maybe that might be like my 5 cents of input.
I will kind of combine the two questions, because discussion becoming public and what else we can do. Definitely of universities putting or taking the responsibility in these areas. And it was a struggle for us to also react to this climate after October 7th. And, so many organizations writing statements and then, collecting signatures. Then we wanted to actually put more thinking into this and put more effort towards discussing the topic and organize the talk series and walking on the tightrope was the title, because we were also trying to understand what's the dynamic in this discussion, etc. So I think definitely Off University takes this role somewhat, and there are many other organizations actually trying to do this outside of academia, bringing academia into civil society so it can reach more people, make discussions more public. But I don't know what else more than this. Like, we are trying to create the space because there's already great minds. When you put them together, there are discussions happening. Making these public, I guess civil society is one key towards reaching out to the public. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Tuba, of University, you have.
I have mine. I would rather answer another question. Maybe it was about also your question. I think I would also just really relate it to our findings that we had in the Langenacht event about this research project urgently wanted. So there is a hierarchy in science, male and female. There's a hierarchy that, and also a perception that generally European academia, or let's say even US academia, I think, thinks that they have a better, they are hierarchically in a higher position than the people in Middle East. This is really, at least to be aware that they think that, they perceive that there's a hierarchy. Also within science, social science is lower than or devalued than the Naturwissenschaft. So I think this is one of the things that we should really acknowledge and at least know that here in Germany, we have a problem about academic freedom. At least to admit this would be a starting point. So.
Can I actually, sorry, that hierarchy to highlight, it's also existing between teacher and the students. And it's another thing we are trying to do, like making discussions public. Maybe it's another key point here, like trying to diminish those hierarchies so you feel like you can join the conversation, which is already very valuable.
Markus?
I would like to say something in response to the question about the German education system in this awkwardness or difficulty in talking about Palestine, and I would like to connect it with the question about empathy. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I think definitely there is something, the difficulty in talking about Palestine definitely has something to do with how we are socialized in Germany. It has something to do with, in the end, not with Palestine as such, but it has something to do with the legacy of Nazism and the Holocaust. And I have to say this is something that I personally also, I embody that. You know, this is part who I am, to have a very critical consciousness about what happened in the Holocaust. And this is something that actually motivates me in being political, and it motivates me in taking sides. And I want to say, I don't feel guilty, for it was nothing that I did. It's something that my grandfather was part of, or my grandfather's generation. But I have like a strong consciousness, and I think many of that have a very strong consciousness of inheriting somehow this legacy of the Holocaust, right? And this connects to this question of empathy. So we, in a way, we are trained to be not only have empathy with Jews as such, as like one of the major victims of the Holocaust, but then, and this is kind of course, you know, this then connects to also this notion of the Deutsche Staatsräson. We are also trained to have empathy with Israel, right? And, you know, well, I mean, there's a particular connection here. But it is very difficult, it then becomes very difficult if you are so trained in a way, you're so much socialized in this empathy, also then with Israel, to, in this case where you have like this strong conflict with different sides to be also empathetic to those who might be the victims of Israel policies, right? So I think these things are somehow connected, but it's not very conscious, and we have to, therefore it has to be brought to the open, it has to be discussed.
I'm sorry that I'm giving signs, but we were told that the slammers are waiting in front of the door. So thank you all for listening to us, engaging with us. Thank you very much for your contributions. We will sit outside, and if you want, please join us for more discussion.